Welcome to Behind the Cusp, a podcast diving deep into the layers of self-growth, inner work, and transformation. I'm your host, Marissa Mead, and after 15 years as a digital creator, I'm sharing my raw, unfiltered journey of healing and self-discovery to walk alongside you in yours. Together, we'll dive deep into the conversations that matter most, uncovering what it means to truly evolve from the inside out. This is where you elevate into transformation. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Welcome back to Behind the Cusp. We are back here for episode 2. And I just wanted to take a second before I dive into this week's episode to say a massive thank you so much for the excitement around the launch, for downloading the episode, subscribing, listening, your messages, your comments, everything. I am just so excited and overwhelmed with the response, and I'm so excited that you guys are so excited to walk along this journey of this new podcast and just movement with me. And I cannot wait to see where it takes us. So on that note, for today's episode, this is going to be like the first full deep dive episode. Like I said last week, episodes will typically be probably about 30 to 40 minutes. That's my goal. And we're going to dive deep into a different topic or thing each week. So this week's episode is actually one that is very deeply personal for me. And I'm just going to hit it hard, like out of the gates, running straight forward, because I feel really strongly to share this full story with you all. In this deeply personal episode, I'm going to take you back to a moment in my life that completely shifted the course of my entire life and future, and a moment where I didn't even fully grasp the magnitude of this choice. And that is when I ended my engagement after being in a 6-year relationship. It definitely was not an easy decision, and we're going to kind of walk through the stages and steps of that. But looking back, now that I think it's 8 years removed from that time, I can wholeheartedly and confidently say that it was the single most powerful choice I could have made to truly change the entire trajectory of my life. We are going to start the podcast here because I am asked about this pivotal moment on a near weekly basis in my DMs by women with all sorts of situations and circumstances and backgrounds. I'm asked by friends, strangers that I meet. It comes up in conversation. And so in a nutshell, I know that this part of my story is one that is meant to truly impact women and not in the ways that you may think. And that's why we're going to dive deep into this situation in this week's podcast episode. Before we dive into the actual engagement ending in and of itself, I kind of want to set the stage for you about the relationship and just give you like a good foundation of things. So the backstory here is we were together for 6 years, pretty much all of my 20s. I was from 23 to 28, and we had broken up in the middle of our relationship at one point, just putting that out there. I actually was having a conversation with some of my girlfriends last week when we got together the day of the podcast launch. I had like a little get together with friends just to celebrate the launch, and they were asking about what my first episode was going to be, and I shared this with them, and all of these friends know about this time in my life in one way or another. And it kind of sent me back into the realness and the rawness of those moments and places and spaces and emotional things that I hadn't really thought about or felt in a really long time. And one of the things that I shared with them that I actually don't think I've thought about or realized in the time since was that from the beginning of that relationship, I actually never fully felt settled or at peace. And it wasn't something that was like constantly blaring in my face, but more so just this tiny little twinging. You know what I mean? And to that point, I actually had also broken up or kind of ended things really early on, like in the first maybe like 4 or 5 months, because I was like, I don't know why, something just doesn't feel totally how it should or whatever. But then consequently just kind of like fell back into the pattern of our relationship. Our lives were very intersected at the time. We were in the same friend circles. We were in the same social circles. We had a lot of the same viewpoints. We were aligned in beliefs, and we were in the same church and volunteering on the same teams. And there was just so many things that were kind of aligned in our lives. And so outwardly, I was kind of looking at all those things and I was like, well, I don't know why I feel this way, because everything is lined up, you know? So I kind of maybe convinced myself, I guess, of it being the right thing and just kept moving forward. And as I did, it's like all those kind of thoughts just went off to the side and I was in the pattern and in the cadence of the relationship. So fast forward to more towards the end of our relationship, we got engaged in December of 2017. And also in the moments following that moment of getting engaged, I actually had a panic attack for various reasons. This is not something I have ever shared with anyone. And to be honest with you, I don't think in the moment I realized what was really happening. A lot of the things that I'm sharing today are kind of things that I have looked back, and because I've grown to where I am now, I'm able to see them so much more clearly. And that's why I'm sharing all of this. So to set the stage, we were in New York City and we were with his family for a day around the holidays. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't love New York City and never have. I'll visit here and there. I've always gone in for work trips and fashion week and like all of those kinds of things, but it's not a place that holds any type of special meaning for me. And it kind of felt out of place that my engagement would be happening there and not like on a beach or a sunset involved or something like that, you know? That was the first thing, the fact that we were in New York, and that was unsettling for me. 2, none of my family knew. And as I established in the first episode, my family is so important to me. So his extended family was with us in the city that day. And after we had gotten engaged, we went down and they were all there and everything, but none of mine was. And that didn't feel good for me, that I wasn't sharing this exciting, monumental moment of my life with anyone that was important to me from my family. That just felt weird for me. And then 3, it was Christmas time, Rockefeller Center. There's a million people hustling, bustling around. This is nighttime, so it's like the tree is lit, you can't move, it's packed like sardines. I also was in such an emotionally charged state because I was like completely shocked and just like, oh my God. And I think personally, I would have loved to just be in privacy and not feel so bombarded with an absolute mob of people and feeling very... And then 4, we had gotten into a huge argument. I don't even know what it was about the day before. I remember I barely slept that night. I was like crying and crying for hours. And I told him I was not going on our city day trip that we had planned. And he was like, no, you're absolutely going, insisting. And now I know why, because this was being planned. So all in all, none of these things are why I ended the actual engagement. Obviously, they're not like things that you would end something over. However, I wanted to share them because even in the moments following what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life felt off for me. And this is key in the rest of this story. Like I said before, we got engaged in December of 2017, and by May of 2018, I knew it was not something that I could live with for the rest of my life. Transparently, I was seeing recurrent patterns of lying, and just not even full-blown lies, but just like little white lies and things where I was seeing these patterns happening with him that were extremely bothersome to me. I couldn't marry someone that I didn't trust. And that was kind of like the gateway, I think, of me questioning if this was the right decision. Because that question was already there, but I wasn't really exploring it. So these little things, these little white lies or little inconsistencies, or one thing wouldn't line up with the next. And I was like, like it made me feel like I had this constant nagging feeling. And if this was the happiest that I was ever supposed to be, I was like, I'm not really that happy. I feel like I'm constantly calculating this or that, or trying to figuring out if, what he's saying is right or whatever. And it didn't feel like I felt like it should. The other thing was that I was also looking for validation and affirmation outside of me that this was the right next step. I met with people that I looked up to, leaders, mentors, people in my life that I trusted at that time of my life to get guidance and direction, and for the most part receive feedback that was affirming that we were making the right choice, that there was no outward, reason not to, our lives aligned, all of these things kind of in a nutshell, and basically that nothing seemed wrong. And I would look at the ring on my finger and think, that's right, like nothing really is wrong, like there's nothing inherently wrong with this. And so I would kind of just ignore the little feeling that I had because I couldn't really explain it. It was like, it wasn't big enough where it was blaring in front of me. It was just little moments where it would come up. And also, let me just say that I grew up in a very Christian, conservative home where prayer and seeking God for the answers was the answer. This was something that I regularly practiced. I spent hours and hours upon hours pouring out my heart to get answers when in reality, I already had them. I just didn't realize it. As I have now grown in wisdom and understanding, our intuition and those little nudges is our God-given ability to just know and to have the answer. And had I listened to that voice and gone inward instead of outward to seek the answers, I would have had it. Instead, I was constantly going outside myself, seeking out the answer, praying for it to come to me, when in reality, I already had it within me. This was a crucial moment for me and in this entire process, because the second I stopped going outside of myself for the answer and listened to the pounding heart that was within me, I felt free. It was clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. And in that moment, a decision that would absolutely wreck me and strip me of all of the things that I had in my life at that time, but at the same time, massively alter the course of my life in the most monumental way, became clear. I couldn't marry this person. So as a 27-year-old who thinks their life is going one way, I made the toughest decision of my life. And I looked at the man that I thought I was going to be spending my life with and told him I could not do this. And you know what? In that moment, he looked at me and he knew too. We both looked at each other, and with the deepest heartbreak in our eyes, oh my God, this is really emotional to think about because I can go back to that moment and I remember so clearly where I was, what it felt like. We agreed that it wasn't something that we both could do. And while it was one of the scariest moments, for the first time, I felt relief. I remember we also looked at each other like, okay, now what? Because no one writes a playbook for this part. There's no right next steps when everything is shattering in front of you. The days and the weeks following that day are an absolute blur for me. And when I think back, I think unconsciously I blocked a lot of them out because I was in such despair and the pain was just so deep. What I do remember about them is that they were so hard and so lonely. I spent most of my time alone, for better or worse, during that time. I think there's definitely moments where I needed to be alone to really kind of process my emotion and feel it. And that was one thing that I can say in that time. I truly allowed myself to feel all the emotions of what I was going through. I was fully present to the emotional experience that I was going to. I let myself be completely shattered and completely heartbroken. I didn't try to force anything. I cried and cried and cried and cried until my body physically couldn't cry anymore some days. I was a complete shell of a human. I barely left my bed, never mind leaving the apartment I lived in at the time. I don't think I left very much the entire summer. The only things I remember doing were going to one of my close friends' homes because she had actually walked through the same thing several years prior, ending an engagement. And at that, fast forward to where we were in 2017, she was married with a couple kids, and I really felt like she was the only person who could understand the level of pain that I was feeling. And so I felt safe and okay in her presence. But other than that, it was like there was nowhere I could go where I felt okay. Anything else was a trigger for me. I remember I tried going to the grocery store and I had a full-blown meltdown in one of the aisles because I was seeing happy couples shopping, or I would see an ingredient that we would use in like one of our favorite meals, and all the reminders of what my life looked like now, seemingly empty and despair and just brokenness and all these things, would come flooding over to me. So I left the grocery store and I was like, okay, I can't go back, And I think at this time, this is when Instacart was like newly out. And so I started Instacarting things, and truthfully, there was only one thing I could eat that entire summer. Actually, two things: crunchy Cheetos and this gluten-free pepperoni pizza. And I'm trying to remember the brand right now. Amy's, maybe it's called. I don't know. But it was literally cardboard and disgusting. But it was the only thing I could stomach eating. I probably ate like 15 of those the entire summer. That was the only thing I could eat. So I would Instacart that every couple of days and literally just like nibble on it. Anyway, I couldn't eat. I couldn't walk because I didn't have energy. At times, I felt like I couldn't breathe. That was the other thing. There was this like intense pressure on my chest. And when you go through heartbreak, your body actually physically protects yourself from the emotional pain that you are feeling. So you oftentimes become kind of like closed off and closed in your posture, rather than, shoulders up and back and head tall and everything. You just kind of like cower down. And in that, your lungs physically fold and become crunched down. So you can't get a full breath. And I'm sure there's more science and all the things behind it, but I was literally experiencing trouble breathing because my body was going through this like protective mechanism. I would also stay in bed all day and then be up until like 3 a.m. binge watching a show. I actually went through Good Wife that summer. That's one thing I do remember. Mindlessly just like losing myself in the show and the characters and everything, because it felt like I wasn't in like reality when I would watch, the show. While yes, there were things I was doing to kind of numb that feeling, at the same time, like I said before, I was also just allowing myself to really experience the whole thing. And in those first 3 months where everything was so raw, I truly believe that is what contributed to my overall healing, because I allowed myself to be so fully present to the heartbreak that I was going to. I wasn't trying to just like have my life move forward and just be normal and all these things. I really sat in the pain and the grief of all the things that I was going through, while still recognizing that, yes, my life is going to move forward. It's not always going to be this bad. Even though I knew I was making the best and right decision, it wasn't easy. I really need you to hear this right now. So let me say it again. Even though I knew I was making the best and right decision, it was not easy. The right thing is rarely ever the easiest thing. And this is one major reason why we usually stay exactly where we're at, because the pain of change feels greater than the pain of staying where we are. And this can be applied to literally anything in life. It was painful. It was miserable. It was unbearable. At times, I felt like I was going to die from the pain on a literal cellular level. I looked so much weight. I looked empty and so dead inside. I remember looking back at some photos from that summer, and all I can see is just emptiness in my eyes. We look at people and we see who they are in their eyes. If you take a moment when you talk to someone, meet them, see them, look at their eyes and see if you can start to become aware of how and what they're going through just from the look in their eyes. You can see joy, you can see hurt, you can see emptiness, you can see grief, you can see elated happiness. You can see these things in people's eyes. Anytime it felt too hard to go forward, I'd remind myself that someday I would be thankful that I did this. I had no idea when that day would be, but I made that decision for future Marissa because she would look back and be so glad. Let me also just say that when you lose someone in your life in any capacity, you experience a death. Whether they physically have passed away or they are no longer in your life, you're experiencing the death of them. And it's really hard to navigate those things. There's nothing easy about that. You are losing a massive part of your life, a person, tons of people that come along with it, a family you may love or thought you'd have forever, countless things. It's really hard to navigate the life forward. I remember there was also a friend that I had that was getting married at the time, and I could not go to her bridal shower. There was no ounce of me that could possibly go there. It was too painful. And that's okay. These things were too triggering for me in a time when I was so fragile. We've gone through so much of the actual engagement and really set the tone for that. I want you guys to really grasp the heaviness of this decision, but let's switch gears here and just talk about how it contributed to my life and my growth and the lessons learned and how you can take those things and apply them over to yours. Sometimes we make tough decisions so that we can move forward. Yes, I absolutely could have married this person, but my entire life right now would look completely different. I know I wouldn't be living in Naples, and just the move alone to Naples has brought so much into my life. Friends, travel, phases of my career, now an incredible relationship with a person that I love with every ounce of my being, a new home. I've expanded so many ways, literally hundreds of things. And that's just the little nutshell of Naples, not everything else. But let me say this, and specifically to all of you women listening, trusting yourself and knowing your own worth is everything. I think sometimes we as women question what we already know because of so many different societal conditionings, of things going on around us, of our backgrounds, of how we grew up, of the people that are in our life, like you name it. There are so many things, and we need to stop doing that. We need to stop questioning. We also need to stop feeling pressure by outside things, timelines, expectations. That was another thing in the entire process that I was kind of looking at, was like, oh, well, I'm 27 and what am I going to do? Where am I going to meet somebody in this, that? 27 is so freaking young, okay? If you are listening to this and you are in your 20s, you are so young. Do not even think for a second that you have a time clock ticking and you need to rush anything. Even if you're in your 30s, the world is at your fingertips. You are in the prime years of your life to grow and learn and become who you are. That is what your main focus should be. A relationship, a man, all of these things will come into your life. I should say the right relationship and man and all of these things will come into your life when you are pursuing yourself wholly. It's okay to walk away from something that no longer serves you, that doesn't feel right, that is everything you want, except there's one little thing. Don't settle. Even if it feels like the scariest thing ever, even if you have a ring on your finger, even if your wedding is next week and you've already put $100,000 into it, doesn't matter. Think about the rest of your life. Does $100,000 or a ring on your finger really matter in the grand scheme of your life and your life path and your life force and everything that you were created here to be? I met a now good friend of mine last year, and at the time I had no idea that she was in a relationship that she was starting to question. They had actually just gotten engaged a few months prior. And for one reason or another, somehow my life and story and different things came into her field. And one day she reached out to me and we were talking and messaging, and I had no idea, like I said, the circumstances of what she was going through, but there was something that I said to her, and she has since told me this several times, that it's what stuck with her and allowed her to make that decision. And I said, if you even have to ask yourself if this is the right thing, then you already know the answer. Trust it. When I think back to my own life and my own story, if I didn't second guess those initial feelings I had in those first months of us dating and being together, I would have prevented, if you will, myself from walking through the absolute heartbreak of an engagement ending. However, I know that that entire thing was part of my story so that I can now turn around and use it for good to impact so many other women and to empower women in the places that they're at. Also, don't box this into just a relationship. You can take the principle and the foundational aspect of this episode and apply it to really anything in life. Maybe it's where you're living. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it is a toxic boundary with a family member. Whatever it is, you can take this basic concept and apply it, trust yourself, and to know that your worth is everything. Another thing that I think is so hard about being in this position is that we don't think that we have a choice. But I'm here today to tell you that we always have a choice. You are not bound by a contract. You're not bound by a destination wedding. You are not bound by anything. And even if you're in a relationship and you are feeling certain things, maybe there are patterns within the relationship, patterns in the way that you're being treated, patterns in this person's lifestyle, patterns in any capacity of the relationship, and they don't sit right with you. Listen to those things. Listen to those nudges, to those feelings. And deep down, you already know the answer. You already know if this is the right thing for you or not. I think a lot of times we as women especially are looking for, is this the right person? Is this the person I'm going to marry? Is this the person? And we're always looking at the other person and if they are the right fit for us, instead of looking inward to ourselves and ask, is this what I really want? Is this what I really need? Is this something that fulfills me? You see how we change that shift right around? We go from looking at the other person, is this the right person? Looking at them and how they fit into our lives instead of asking ourselves about ourselves. We forget that we need to just tune inward to how our body is responding, reacting, what it's telling us. Our bodies know. We have that innate wisdom inside of us. It directs and leads us if we are willing to listen. Along with making that decision of ending my engagement, I was really just thinking about that one decision and not realizing how much it would really affect the rest of my life. And of course, it's not like we have a glass ball and we can see a year to 5 out. But now, 8 years down the line, I can look back and see how pivotal that one decision truly was, and that it changed the entire trajectory of my life. I talked before about Naples and that I wouldn't live here, but that one choice and me following the nudges within really sparked a shift in the way that I lived my life from that point on, because I went from constantly going outside of myself for the answers to really understanding myself and learning to trust what I was feeling. And in the years that followed my engagement, I went to therapy for so many years and went through such a emotional transformation. The way that I processed emotions, the way I approached situations, it changed so much for me in that aspect. And then it affected my relationships and the way that I was showing up, the type of people that I allowed in my life, the ways that I was allowing myself to be treated, whether it was by family or friends or in the workplace or whatever it was. And I think kind of the nutshell of what I'm saying here is that one choice truly has the potential to affect everything because of the ripple that it has on everything else. Like if you take your finger and drop it into a body of water that is completely still, you are going to see the effects of that wave go from one tiny little centimeter near you up to thousands of feet beyond. That's truly what happened when I made that choice. It sent me on a path that I never could have dreamed, but it was one that my soul was calling me to. A path of deeper knowing, a path of self-discovery, a path of understanding myself deeply on an emotional level. These are all things that have contributed to where I'm at in life now. You know, the ability to have a healthy relationship where communication and me voicing my feelings or emotions or whatever is something that I'm able to do. You know, even within friendships, sticking up for myself, not tolerating being treated a certain way or talked to a certain way, or understanding the type of people that I want to surround myself with. And to that point, I could go on and on and on in the ways that I could apply how this one decision has affected me. But I think overall, what I really want to drive home as like the main point here is that you are in the driver's seat. You are not bound by anything or even any one decision you've made in the past. Your life is literally one decision away from completely changing, and it's having the courage to make that decision. I've had people tell me in the past, oh my God, you're so strong. Like I could never do that. And the thing is that I wasn't that strong. Like I just told you guys how absolutely rattled and rocked I was for months. There was no strength in those moments. There was surviving, you know? It wasn't that I was so strong and that I could do something that you can't. It was that I had the courage to do it and also knew that I wanted more for myself. One thing that I constantly had said to myself in that time was, if this is the happiest I'm ever supposed to be, I'm not really that happy. And like I said before, that was the light bulb moment where I was like, oh, so I can't do this. And so it came down to knowing that and having the courage to walk away and choose myself, really. That's really what it comes down to at the most basic level, is that I was choosing me. I was choosing the happiness of my future self instead of the safety of whatever the present was bringing me. And when in reality, it wasn't bringing me any safety. I was stressed out. I was worried. I was calculating his next move. I had my guard up. I was protecting myself from feeling certain things. You know, there was no safety in that. And those of you that are listening today who may be in similar situations, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The mental gymnastics of going back and forth between something, weighing the pros and cons and all that. If you have to do mental gymnastics, if you have to weigh pros and cons, you already have the answer. The answer should be in front of you. You will feel peace. You will be settled. You won't need to weigh the pros and cons of someone or something, a choice, a path, a lifestyle, a career, a person, whatever it is. You will know. The inner knowing will be there. And that's really what it came down to as I made that choice. So I feel like I could sit here and talk about this topic for hours and hours. And I also know that by talking about this, there's probably going to be so many different questions or deeper things that you may want to dive into about it. So I am totally willing to do a Q&A. If you pop over to the Instagram page for the podcast, I'm going to pop a Q&A over there today. Drop any questions or feedback or write me a message or a DM or even an email and share your thoughts, your heart. If you were in a tough spot and need some encouragement or someone to uplift you in making a tough choice, I'm your girl, I'm your cheerleader. I will support you in those tough moments because I know I needed that support. With that being said, thank you so much for listening to my story today, for walking back through some of these really raw and hard moments with me. I hope it resonates with you and speaks to your heart, whether you are at a crossroads within your own life or relationship or even friendships. If you are going through something similar, maybe you've lost a person and you're feeling that hole of heartbreak in your life. Or maybe you just need a reminder that you are strong enough to make tough choices. Next week, I am going to be sharing about the entire journey of my back and the pain that I went through physically in that, and how it applies to self-compassion and surrender and building a mindset. So be sure to subscribe here to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We also have a YouTube channel. Like I said a little bit earlier, don't forget to pop over to the Instagram page. You can connect with me there today about this episode, ask any questions, share your heart, whatever it is. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to open the door of conversation with so many of you on this topic. And before we close, if you are somebody who has followed me over at Style Cusp since the breakup, then you kind of saw the real raw moments that I was kind of walking through at that time. And thank you so much for being here this long, for being an encouragement and a light for me during that time. I am also honored that you would witness the unfolding of who I am in the months since. And to that point, those of you that maybe have made tough decisions, similarly, I am here to witness the evolving of you moving forward in your own life. So until next week, let's end this episode with the exact same thing that we ended the first, because I feel like it is so meaningful to the beginning of this journey of this podcast and the message behind it. Keep tuning inward, because that intuition, those nudges, those feelings, they will lead you home to you. I'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Behind the Cusp. If you love this episode, I'd so appreciate it if you'd rate, review, or share it with someone else who's also on their path of self-growth. These all go such a long way in supporting the show. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me over on Instagram at StyleCusp and follow the show Behind the Cusp. And as always, keep tuning inward. True transformation begins from the inside out.